Annual plan, first report. Welcome, Jason and team.
Thank you, Your Worship. As some context to this report, on the 21st of March, 2 weeks ago, Council adopted the following recommendations. Council approved and adopted the draft annual plan, and as part of that, Council adopted the proposed financial statements and the funding impact statements. Also approved the groups of activity funding income impact statements, the proposed fees and charges, the capital funding, and other financial information, which included the sample properties. At that meeting, Council also approved and adopted the draft consultation document, subject to some minor amendments, which we can go through today. And Council also adopted the statement of proposal for resource management fees. And as part of that paper, we also confirmed the proposed consultation approach for the annual plan. So that's a bit of context where we come from. The purpose of the paper in front of us today is actually pretty straightforward. We've got information and responses to the questions that Council has raised. So there are probably 4 key questions around Sophia Street, which Andrew's going to talk to, Peel Forest remediation, which Andrew will talk to, and there's a few questions around personal costs within the museums and libraries as well. And associated with that, there was some questions around the recreation and leisure staff and supplier variance. A lot of that related to the museum and library numbers as well. There are consequential changes as a result of those questions that we went through. There's been some changes to the fees and charges as a result of that, some updates to the sample properties as a result of that, and also the consultation document as well. The net impact of the work that we've done is to reduce rates from 13.3 to 12.5%, and what I'd like to do is to be able to go through sort of the 4 questions that we've answered, and take questions and then move on to the next one, so that we don't jump ahead. So Andrew's just going to quickly take us through the Sophia Street response.
Yep, thank you. So yes, Sophia Street, firstly, it's a critical asset to the Timaru CBD, and there are, as you're aware, there are some issues with it, some structural issues. It's been brought about by some design issues and also construction issues. So what we are still doing the investigation where it has not been done, and one of the I guess the unknowns is the seismic assessment. That will be done, but we haven't received any report on that to date. But we feel that it's prudent to make some provision for the strengthening of that building, given that it was designed under the old code. It was pre-earthquake. It is precast concrete panel building, and so it may need some structural strengthening. This is only a provision that we put in there. Remember too that car parking is self-funding account, so we will be borrowing for that strengthening work, and it will be funded from car parking fees. So there actually is no rates money going into this particular project.
Brilliant, thanks Andrew. Any questions on the car park further today? Councillor Booth, thank you.
I guess if that's the case, Andrew, why would, until we actually know what we're doing and actually have a sort of a number backed up by some specifics, would we not actually hold off by putting those numbers in until we actually knew what they were? Because, as you said, it's not affecting, but it's actually, it's not looking good.
Our engineering consultants, more structural consultants, have expressed that there may be some urgency with the actual strengthening of this building, and that's why we feel that it's prudent to put the provision at least in there now, because if it is the assessment, seismic assessments come back and it says that we need to do something, we need to have the funding to actually get on and do it. Closing of the car park would have a significant impact on the CBD, and also some of the businesses surrounding it.
Yeah, Councillor Piddington, thanks.
I guess I'm a bit of a loss because I was assured it was fine. Is it fine or not, Andrew, first of all?
is not a dangerous building at this stage, but that dangerous building criteria does not include seismic assessment. So this is the unknown, it's the seismic assessment.
But I'd like to think before we race and replace it or strengthen it, we look at other options as well. Because I haven't been counting them, but every time I've gone past there recently over the 2 weeks, it's not full. So I don't even know if the demand's there anymore. So surely we would do an exercise around that before we start spending it. And I don't see why we just can't shut up the top floor and leave it as it is in the current situation that our ratepayers face.
Any options will be presented to council, but we need to determine what those options are, and that work is still being done. But yes, rest assured, you will be given the opportunity to look at all options, which could mean dismantling the building. It could mean strength. It's not, but you'll still need funding to even dismantle it.
And just for clarity, Andrew, people I'm talking to can't believe we can't take some sort of action against the designer, the builder, perhaps even the council themselves that passed the building or inspected it. Have we had any legal advice on those options to save, again, the ratepayer money?
We're working very closely with our solicitors, and the regulatory team also have solicitors involved in this one as well. One of the big issues we've got is statutory timeframe limitations. The car park was constructed in 2012.
So we're spending monies on lawyers even though we're out of time. Doesn't make sense again, Andrew. Sorry, you can't have it both ways. If it's out of time, it's done, or it isn't, and we're looking at it.
We're looking at it from a construction perspective, but our solicitors are also advising us on other matters regarding to the car park.
So, Andrew, I think the key thing is we're making a provision. It doesn't have an effect on rates for this time, but I think obviously it has significant public interest, being instrumental as far as volume of car parking, whether it's full or not, relative to farmers and other CBD businesses. What's a time frame around more clarity?
We're hoping to complete the investigations and get a seismic assessment within the next couple of months. So by the time we get to that,
So
probably June.
yeah, so possibly before we sign off annual plan as well, potentially, we might know more. Yeah, Jason, thanks.
And I think it's important to note, and that's what I've sort of said in paragraph 22, that there are changes between the draft and final. So information becomes more certain, assumptions are clarified, and so this is one of those things that does fall into that camp. Council officers continue to try to make savings and efficiencies during that time period as well.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good point. Yeah, we've got there's 3 months and some significant changes. So yeah, ideally it'd be good to know more before then. Right, pass back to you next. What are we up to? Landfill, is it?
So just talking about Peel Forest, we have provided some additional detail, recognising that these are cost estimates. We have not gone to market with them, so that the figures could change, and we will have that information hopefully before the next annual plan, so we could make adjustments there. But a substantial amount of it is in fact the disposal costs. We still have to pay waste levy. We still got to basically pay, I guess, the loss of airspace in the Redruth landfill. That's where it's going to be disposed of. So that airspace is going to be consumed. It's going to have to be replaced at some stage. So that's the reason for that cost. There is some land remediation costs. You're going to be left with a big gully. You're going to have to remediate that a bit. And there's the whole trucking cost as well. Now, the other little bit of an unknown is exactly how much waste there is, and more to the point, the composition of that waste. We honestly don't know what's under there. We've done some ground penetrating radar surveys. We know there's a mixture of refuse under there. There is metal, there is drums. We don't know what's in them. So if we do strike hazardous waste, then that can be an issue as well. So yeah, it is, again, it's a provision in which we are again, borrowing for, and yeah, the interest is payable over a long-term period.
Thanks, Andrew. And so, based on the last meeting, we are arranging, it'll be in May, to have a site visit. So that'll come to your calendars soon, probably post-Easter. And on the waste levy, we have via the Mural Forum, because it does, there's issues on this across the country with old landfills. So we have written to the Minister asking for an exemption to the waste levy. So we haven't had a response at this time, but we are working on some other avenues to reduce some of those costs. But I'll take some questions.
I guess that was about the waste levy that goes to the government.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and so should we be paying on waste that's already in a landfill is the question. And so we're asking that of the Minister.
And so basically excavation removal costs 4.1, is that trucking as well? You mentioned it was plus trucking.
Yeah, that's trucks and excavators, and I guess the whole health and safety revolving around that, because they are digging into a bit of an unknown.
There's also a number of other associated entities involved. Can the cost be spread amongst some of these other people, or like the Ministry of Environment, things like that, DOC, whoever's got an interest here that's mentioned? Yeah.
The responsibility of the landfill is on council. We have had financial assistance for some of the river protection works through ECAN, but those have worked to a point, but the banks are still continuing to erode and it's getting very close to the actual landfill. We believe that, basically removal of the landfill is really the only long-term option that we've got.
So could we not invest, that's a lot of money, we could invest in actually redirecting the river away from that and actually moving it away and getting rid of that risk?
We have tried taming the river, but this is the Rangitata, and it's at flood events it goes up to over 2,000 cubics. It's too much water.
Michelle, Councillor Hire, my apologies.
Can you just talk me through this 4.1 million, because I still cannot get my head around this. If there's 30,000 tonnes of refuge and you allow a generous amount for carting that away, you're kind of left with enough digger hours that would take you 5 years. So I just cannot understand how it costs so much.
I guess when we come down to actually pricing this and tendering it, if the costs come in lower, then the budgets will be adjusted accordingly. But we're working on the best estimate that our consultants have given us based on previous landfill jobs. Remember, the health and safety side of things is significantly higher than just digging a hole.
Councillor Piddington.
You were just talking about toxicity, not for this meeting, but can we get an update on chrome platers? Because that site is also one that we're trying to get rid of, and it just seems nothing's happened for a very long time. And I can't see anything in the budget for that.
Yeah, we can, definitely. We'll just include that in the next meeting, I think, in 6 weeks' time, or whenever the schedule is. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Any further questions? Sorry, on the landfill, Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Andrew. Just following on from Councillor Pye's question, do we have an estimated time to remediate the landfill? Because obviously, back of the envelope, Councillor Pye thinks it's 5 years. But do we... Oh, sorry. Not the little yellow digger. Is there an estimated,
Got Vincy, do you want to jump up next to Andrew, just to answer this? Come on, don't be shy.
And then I have a second question just around... Oh, yeah, hang on, I'll hear that one.
Thank you. Yes, so what we're anticipating is once it's signed off from the annual plan, we will need to go through a procurement process, which of course will also go to the tenders committee for approval. So say the contract is awarded late October, early November, All the preparatory work we're looking at having been done prior to Christmas this calendar year, ready to start off in the dry season from, like, say, the 10th of January when we come back, and really knock it out of the park within the 6 months so we can do the remediation, because the time to do your planting is actually in winter, to give it the best chance of response. And so we've proposed this to Arawhenua. They have, of course, a commercial landscape nursery, and we've suggested to them, in partnership, they need to help us identify the types of native planting they want restored there. And even though we are taking out 20,000 cubic meters of waste and soil, which is quite significant, and you've got a slope that's kind of like this, we won't be putting back in 20,000 cubic meters, so there will be a natural slope, and to mitigate erosion and protect neighboring properties to a certain extent, you have to do some really adequate native planting. So we've asked them to start growing those plants that they would like to see now, and that will help for iwi to take ownership and reinforce the partnership aspect we've been looking for.
Thank you, that's awesome. That's way less than what I thought, so that's good. My other question just around, and I probably don't have the right terminology, so please excuse me, but I presume we've done like a assessment, like a river engineering assessment and all of that kind of stuff to say what the likelihood would be of a major flood taking out this landfill, and or also what timeline would be for that. I know that's crystal ball gazing, because, you know, if we could do that, we wouldn't get into the position we are, but there must be some kind of assessment to say after 4 major floods at a certain amount of cubic meters, that would take it out.
Well, the issue you have of braided rivers is that because of the very nature of them, it may not be the flooding what happened this in 2022, it wasn't the size of the floods, it was the frequency of them. So because you had subsequent flooding, that was only about 1,400 to 1,500 cumecs, if I'm correct, at the peak. Yeah. But because of the subsequent floodings that happened over weeks, what happened was that cumulative effect caused far more erosion. So we had done mitigation works in partnership with ECAN in 2021 that we thought would last 3 to 5 years for a significant flood up to about 2,000 cumecs, we thought. But because of the nature of what happened with the storms last winter, those works didn't even last 6 months. So that just gives you the kind of like a taste of the unpredictability with rivers. But what we do know, based on years of history and mapping, is that the river is moving south with all the flooding and the changing patterns. We've redirected 3 times now the channel from the southernmost bank over to the north, kind of on the Ashburton side, as much as we could. But the river is going to go where it wants to go.
Yes, but an assessment has been carried out.
Oh, many assessments have been carried out, Councillor.
Councillor Pike.
So I just have a follow-on question. So you talked about a procurement process, and then a contract would be awarded, but it sounds like we've already awarded a contract to the remedial works for the planting. How does that sit with the procurement policy?
No, what we've asked them to do is to grow the plants, but the reality is we know that we will actually have to purchase some plants. And because Arawhenua are one of the key stakeholders, and Linds, who are the property owners, because they own, this is Crown land, they have said they will take direction from Arawhenua what plants need to go in there. And because Beth has actually worked with a commercial arrangement with Arawhenua to supply our Parks Department with native plantings, this will be in alignment with your procurement policy, because once that is finalized, we're honoring the contract that will be in place. Do I have that right, Beth? Yeah. But thank you, Councillor, that's a good question.
Councillor Shannon.
Just a quick one, actually. With regards to the refuse disposal costs, I'm assuming that the majority of that is going to Redruth, we're hoping. So how much of this are we actually paying to ourselves?
$4.35 million. So the overall cost is $11.75 million. 4.35 will take through the landfill. So the net cost, I'm trying to remember from last meeting, is about 7.4 million, which will fund that over 25 years. I might have those numbers slightly wrong, but that's about what it is.
Good on landfill. Thanks, and Vincent, you missed it, but we are still got a leisure to arrange a bit of a tour out there. Yeah, so we'll take up on that. Right, back to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Moving on to paragraph 12. So this was a few questions around personnel costs. The question was around museum and library personnel seem high compared to the long-term plan. As noted in the report, there was a variance of 407,000 reported in the annual plan compared to the long-term plan. We've gone away and done some research. This related to a number of new positions that we had budgeted for the Theatre Royal and Heritage facility based on the original completion time. We've since revised that downwards to 85,001 new position, with the remainder to be considered as part of the long-term plan. So as a result of that, we've managed to pull out $322,000 from the personnel budget in the long-term plan. And the second part of that was the library's variance of $766,000. We've gone away and done a detailed review of all our remuneration, all our staff across the organisation. We found a misallocation of a couple of staff members in district libraries who should have been in the infrastructure group, namely drainage and water. So we fixed that by moving the staff out of libraries into drainage and water, which has reduced the variance down to $524,000 against the long-term plan. What's important to note is the long-term plan was completed a number of years ago. If we look at the 22-23 annual plan, which is almost the most accurate estimate of where staffing numbers were, the variance from annual plan to annual plan is $71,000. So most of the variance in the libraries occurred 2 years ago as a result of a pay equity program to align the employer's remuneration with the median across the sector. So in terms of paragraph 18, I've tried to summarise it. Overall, personnel costs have moved by $1.23 million from the long-term plan. $900,000 of this is due to $700,000 that we're receiving from the Three Waters in terms of the transition of staff, and $200,000 through Transport Choices program. So overall, the net impact of additional costs to staffing from LTP to this annual plan is $330,000. And I'm happy to take questions on that.
Thanks, Jason. And just on the Three Waters one, it's fine to have the money there allocated from the NTU, but to get the staff is a whole nother question, isn't it?
And you did right, Your Worship, that's the challenge. So we're estimating 7 staff, but the challenges Andrew is dealing with is ensuring that we get the right staff with the right skills to do that work for us. And the good thing is we have the money and we can determine the types of positions that will benefit us the most as well.
Thank you. So questions, who wants to kick in first? Councillor Puddington, thanks.
Jason, a lot of people think the museum and theatre's still a long way away. What's the position we're creating at 85K?
I believe it to be an events position. So obviously the theatre is a long way away, but to get into the cycle of events, obviously Ashburton and Oamaru are already on the circuit of events, and so we need to get in early to ensure that we can work out what we can achieve, what we can get, and it fits in with the operating model that councillors have asked us to go away and look at. So we need to ensure that when we build it, we've got things in place.
I guess my only question is that we also have a swimming complex, a stadium we're rebuilding. Are we actually doing this the right way? Shouldn't we have an overall strategy or are we getting one for each of those as well?
In terms, I can only talk to the Theatre Royal. So as part of the last long-term plan, there was consideration given to how much to invest in Theatre Royal. As part of that, we estimated the operating costs in terms of the amount of staff that we would need. So those are factored into the long-term plan. With the timing of the project moving, the costs move with that. In response to your other question, it's a hard one to answer. We've got these new facilities coming on board. The driver is the replacement and renewal of those facilities or the enhancement. And by and large, we're aware of the operating costs that you need to manage these facilities, and a lot of them are baked into the budgets already.
Thank you. Councillor Whittingham, you're all good with that one? Yeah. Further on item 12? No, all good?
I think it's important to note that, so we just did some analysis. So the amount of, I guess, head count for the council in year 3 of the long-term plan was sort of estimated at 335 people. The 2022 annual plan had 340 people budgeted for, and this annual plan has 342. So we've got an increase of 7 over the long-term plan estimate and 2 over the last annual plan. I just thought I'd throw those numbers out there as well.
That was a question I asked Pete earlier. What are those extra positions, just so we're aware of them? And where are they and at what level sort of thing? Because if we're growing the organisation, people want to see improved service or something.
Yeah, it's quite, it's a good question, Councillor Piddington. And the thing is that when we look at the positions, there's quite a number of new positions or realigned and recast positions, because when a role becomes vacant, we don't just go and necessarily replace like for like. We actually go and rescope, and in some instances we don't replace into that area. We might see a greater need somewhere else where we've got a single point of failure. But if you were to ask, I think those positions would most closely align. And well, look, there's new positions in IT to support the digital transformation. There's some new positions in the roading area to support the transport choices. We've got new positions into health and safety to try and ensure that we meet our health and safety obligations. There's some new positions into areas like procurement. So they're across the organisation. It's in terms of where they sit, the average salary for them is about $78,000 to $80,000. So they're probably at they're not at they're a tier below, say, a unit manager or something of that order, I guess. They're sort of down in the organisation, but it's quite hard for us to say it's this position or that position, because when we look across the organisation, we tend to go and work out where the need is greatest. And so if we're doing digital transformation, then we need to go and make sure that we've got IT people to support the architecture. We're aware, for instance, that building control and resource planning need a number of places. So we are often rebalancing where they are, and it's not like we just have them fixed. I'm not sure that really helps, but what we tend to do is look at a fiscal envelope and operate within the fiscal envelope and stay within that. Of the increased fiscal envelope, 900,000 has come from the government choices that we're asking for. There's about 300,000 out from the long-term plan. Keep in mind, we've actually had to absorb inside that quite a bit of minimum wage increase as well. So it's been a tight fix, but that's how we look at our remuneration budgets, is inside that overall fiscal envelope. Happy to take more questions though.
Just one right at the end, I thought we were on a living wage at the council. Are we on a minimum wage?
No, we've got living wage. And so as that goes up, as the minimum wage goes up, so does the living wage. And in fact, I think the living wage is going to 26 something from 1 September. I can't remember the number. So we have to push that up. And I think then the important thing to remember, say if the living wage goes to 26, would say 26 something, what then happens is there's a calibration for those who might be, say, $2 or $3 above the living wage, we have to then make sure that they're proportionately moved up as well. So there is a concertina effect. It does peter out, but it does then have to be adjusted. So we manage all of that inside that fiscal envelope.
But just a point of clarity, we don't have a living, probably for the new ones, we don't have a living wage policy. So we're not actually bound by any number. Correct. Yeah. Councillor Booth.
Yeah, look, I'm just looking back at some stats around what our personnel charges were and what they are now. Up until 2021, 22, it was up by 67%. That's just personnel charges alone. And then obviously the advent of the lawyer as well as the the consultant. So the consultant was 4.5 million. That started from a very low base. So I guess out of this budget we're talking about here now, we know what the personnel cost is, but where are we at roughly with our consultant costs? Because I would probably suggest that between the two, they would represent probably 90% of the increases in rates over the last 5 to 6 years. So that's a major concern to me. I just see that number keeps going up, and it's something we don't generally talk about a hell of a lot.
Yeah, so can you just repeat the number?
Well, you've got the piece of paper. I did email it to you. And it's so say from 2016-17 we were paying 14.265 in personnel costs, and we are now last year between the consultants and the personnel costs, that number had doubled. So we were spending another 14 million in that area. So I guess that's the area that I actually think we should be honing at. All this is peripheral stuff that we're looking to the future, and it's not really affecting things. But actually what is affecting the numbers here for the ratepayer is the escalation in our personnel costs and our consultants. So I guess I'm not sure what we can do. We every time we talk about it, there is actually going to be
So what I've said, and thanks for sending that through, and I said what I'll do before the end of, before we make final decisions in June, is that we will update that spreadsheet as you've asked, but also we have to, I think some of the metrics that should be there are missing, because you're looking at some information in isolation without looking at the increase over that time, such as the capital program. So we were delivering 30 million, but now we're delivering 70 million. So if you're not looking at those things, it's easy to come up with whatever narrative you want by only looking at certain metrics. But if we're actually to do this properly, then we need to look further afield and get all the information. And also you've got over that period, you've got increase in minimum wage like we've never seen before, living wage and all those sort of things. So I agree that we should have a really hard look at it, but I don't think we should be looking at it in isolation, because you're only going to get an answer that you are trying to construct.
Well,
but
as
Jason,
our financial wizard over here has just explained to us, the capital items are not actually affecting our rate increase. So now, who is the chief executive here? Oh, sorry, who is the finance? Who is actually the head of finance here? Is it Jason, or is it our chief executive? Who's actually in charge of the finance? As in, who's our financial controller?
Yeah. I think you're trying to muddy the waters a little bit there. So you're saying the capital program doesn't, you're trying to say capital doesn't have any...
These items and the theatre are, over a period of time, are not going to impact the rates this year. Is that right?
No, but
Yeah. So, well, look, to answer these questions, Councillor Booth, so number one, I'm responsible for the overall budget and presenting it. So in terms of when you say it doesn't affect the rates, but if we have people working on a capital project and we pay them, so we have project managers inside the organisation, then that goes into the remuneration budget. So we have to pay them, and that shows in that line for remuneration. To the point about consultants, we've got estimated, I think, 3.2 million for the annual plan, Jason, and we increased it by 200,000 or 300,000 for Sophia Street. So that's what the consultant's budget is. But what we've also got, from your point from 2016, is a number of increased functions that are delivered across council. So you've got district plan, you've got audit and risk, you've got health and safety, you've got climate change, and we've increased our capital program. The thing about the capital is if we pay a person to manage a project, the amount we pay them goes into the remuneration budget that is reported in the financial statements and that you see here, but it goes to a cost centre, which is that capital project, so that we keep a track of the cost of that capital project. But
And is that immortalised over the long-term life of that asset?
well, the cost of the asset, if we build it, is depreciated over its useful life. So, but the actual expense for it, in terms of paying people, has to be reflected. So if I went and was working purely on, say, for argument's sake, the microfiltration plant, then any wages I get paid would be attributed to me. It would go into the remuneration line, but it would go to a capital cost centre microfiltration. That's how so that we keep track of the capital cost, but you also see the remuneration line in the financial statements. So in a way, it kind of appears in two places, but it's not double counted because the cost centre gets eliminated when we prepare the financial statements.
I guess the point I'm just getting at is that the big numbers are actually of the increases for our ratepayers are actually in those numbers that I mentioned. So, and obviously,
But yeah, so you're actually factually incorrect because you're saying that a lot of the consultancy cost is tied within capital works, which is funded through debt, and which has a minimal effect because it's an intergenerational activity. But you're trying to say it has a high effect on rates, but that's actually incorrect. So
when we capitalise, say, 2.5 million in wages into capital items, does that come off that number? Does that come off the personnel costs that we're seeing here?
Not this top line that you see in the financial statements. No, it's into the 2.5 million. So when we present the budget, which last year, or when we fortnight ago, or we present the financial statements and it shows remuneration, it includes wages paid to officers to do work on capital projects.
I think, as I was getting back to, I think the thing I was trying to emphasise was the big increases in numbers are over a period of time, what I mentioned. So, in particular, personnel costs.
yeah, like, that's fine, but I think we need to bring more information, and I'll talk with Jason and perhaps Alan as well in regard to that. So we've got that information before June. And I mean, part of the only because it's topical, I think part of the analysis with the review would be in education for all councillors is just to look at some of that cost in detail around consultancy and stuff and understand. We can do it in a public workshop or as an example and understand where that lies. Some of the things that stormwater is a great example. We've got to get that consultancy in because we don't have the stormwater engineers in-house at the moment. So look at what some of the things that we have to do and where some of those opportunities. So I think that's probably a good, well-rounded way to do some analysis on that and also educate everyone at the same time and the public. Is you, Councillor Pinnington? Yeah.
Yeah, look, I guess what I'd like to see is something showing us a moment in time, if that's the right word, because I'm a bit like Alan, I'm a bit confused what's going into projects, what's not, and how it sits, because it's an easy say that a consultants and things like that are only in projects, but that's clearly not true to one level, Nigel. I mean, so I'd like to see where it sits, so we're really clear that's a project and that's a cost associated to this is our operating cost. Because one of the things I'm getting hammered on is our consultants' cost in the bill, and clearly they're not all in projects. We bring consultants in to act in positions in council for a period. And I guess my frustration is once they've done their role and we've employed someone, they seem to hang on in other roles. I mean, we have a consultant that's earned $1.10 million according to the Timaru Herald in the past 3 years, part-time. And if you annualise that, that's more than the chief executive's earnings. So I just would like a real hard look at it, because it's easy to keep people on, I get that, But if we employ people and they're capable in senior management positions, the other people should disappear because they should be capable of delivering that.
Yeah, look, and to my point, I think that's what we can put up and do some analysis across all those things on what we can or may be able to influence and what we can't, and we might get a bit of a wake-up call to actually, unless we have a significant change on the way we deliver our business. I don't know, we might find some savings as well, and I'm sure we will. Yeah, but I think that's the approach, and so maybe we look to do that just in the timeline relative to June, so we can, but I'm happy to.
Yeah, it might help if we brought a workshop, did it by way of workshop, because there could be a lot of questions, particularly around the issue of how capital and the REM that goes into it and so on, and how we recast our positions and realign them and so on. I think that we'd be quite happy to do that because it aligns, Your Worship, with the question you asked a fortnight ago about what are we doing to review how we deliver our business to make sure we're getting real value for money in that. And so that is a constant challenge for us in the environment we work in. And maybe it's quite a significant piece of work if we show the narrative and the progression along that and what we've had to respond to in a variety of positions. But a workshop might help in terms of elevating it and giving it some visibility, because I think visibility is an issue here that would, sunlight is the best disinfectant, might throw some clarity on it. So we'd be more than comfortable to do that.
And that'll be pretty topical, so we can, if it's not live stream, we can invite media to that as well. I'll come back to Jason, thanks.
Thank you. Just moving on very quickly, paragraph 2021, the Mayor had a question around the recreation and leisure funding impact statement in terms of the $1.7 million variance. Because of the changes in salaries in museum and libraries, that's reduced down to 1.2 million. So that helps explain that. That 1.2 million is largely driven by the $680,000 increased escalation costs within the parks maintenance area and the libraries and museum staff costs as well. Moving on to paragraph 24, so proposed fees and charges. So at the 21 March Council meeting, it was agreed that staff would go back and put 5% onto all the areas which had not had an increase in terms of the ones that have come through. So we have undertaken that exercise and the fees and charges schedule is attached. Overall, we've managed to find $243,000 in increased revenue as a result of that and some increased trade waste revenue. And happy to take any questions on fees and charges.
Who was Councillor Piddington, then
Jason, if we can just go back to 21, an explanation is 680 escalation of contract costs. I know we touched on it. What's that? What percentage increase is that on the actual contract? Because I'd love to have a contract that I can, a year later, go back and say, hey, I'm 685k short. Let's fund it. So I'd like to know what the percentage increase and whether it's on supplies, wages, what sort of breakdown do they have to supply us with to get that increase?
It's a number of contracts, it's not just one, and generally these contracts were let about 5 years ago, so on pretty much fixed rates. If they have had adjustments using CPI over that time, but that CPI is not a good indication of actual contract costs. So the 680,000 is basically applying the producer price index, which is what is generally recognised in the contracting industry and is what's used by organisations like Waka Tahi as the true contract cost. So it's just applying that figure. It is, and then we will be re-tendering these contracts. But we've got to go through a Section 17A review first, and that will come back to council because you may decide to change the way we deliver the service by, say, using our own staff versus contractors, or continue with contract staff. So it's basically based on a Statistics New Zealand index.
So why did they accept for 5 years the CPI and suddenly want to go to the other one? Is that within the contract that you have written, that they could pick either?
the contracts were written with CPI, but those contracts have now expired. So we're now claiming CPI was moving relatively consistent with PPI during that time, but now, of course, things with contract costs since COVID, they've escalated quite significantly. And we've had basically a 20% increase in construction rates in the last 2 years. So this is what the contractors are faced with. So do we pay them, or do we just drill them to the wall? And yeah, they basically go bankrupt. And yeah,
I guess I was interested in the point they've expired. Why haven't we got new contracts in place before contracts expire? That seems a wee bit odd to me.
the basic reason for that is that before letting major contracts, you've got to do a Section 17A review, and there's been some delays in doing that, and it was predominantly around the industry availability of consultants and the whole COVID thing. So we're working on that at the moment.
Any follow-ups on that, Councillor Piddington? You're all good on that? So it's a...
Well, not really.
No, no,
coming
no,
back, but
no.
he's given an answer I'm very unhappy with, I guess I'd say.
But I presume, Andrew, you do extensions to contracts rather than, they don't lapse, they will have extensions.
That's correct, Councillor, yeah.
Yeah, but it's an extension that allows them quite an increase that the ratepayer faces, is my point.
It is a case of doing that or losing the service altogether, and that's something we cannot afford to do.
And this goes back to the review point. Yeah.
So when will we have it sorted? I need some deadlines, because we tend to drift on all these things.
Yeah, I mean, Andrew, you might be able to speak to that specific example.
I don't have that information on hand, but we are certainly in the next 3 months anyway, we'll be presenting to Council on the Section 17A review.
I think on some of these things that we're reviewing, though, there again, it's balancing the in-house capability. So I see it being a 12-month time period, potentially on some of these items. And happy to be challenged on that, but I just think realistically it might be that long. We'll go now to being waiting for a while. I think Councillor Booth.
Now, I was just wondering what we've got in our budgets for the price of carbon at the moment. What have you based your assumptions of these numbers on?
So within the annual plan, we base the ETS at $80 a unit. The annual number.
80.
80. Okay, I've just saved you $1 million. Okay, now current price is $48. Carbon's tanked. So there's $1.05 million that you could save in the cost of carbon if you actually were to buy them now.
And look, to that point, we were careful in the December auction where we didn't go for the price that would have had us paying at that price. So, and went and purchased on the secondary market at a much more competitive rate, because actually we were observing that. So we are mindful of that, Councillor Booth, of not just paying in the auction at the going rate, and we're watching the carbon price. But we're not speculating, but we do think it's appropriate to hedge our risk on that point. So we do monitor and watch that with a view. But when the budgets were being prepared, the price in December was what? It passed in at 75 or something anyway, didn't it?
$78.
$78. So that was the information we had at that point in time.
I think we are, because you just raised it. So,
From my perspective, that's one of the things in terms of paragraph 22, between draft and final, assumptions become clearer, and we factor those into the final annual plan. So remember, this is the draft annual plan. things will become clearer, and as you pointed out, there's some wiggle room within the price of those units.
Alrighty, you're on good on that. I mean, not 100% happy, but we'll move forward. Thank you.
Final item is we have tabled the draft consultation document, so you should all have a copy of that. This needs to be with the printers on about Thursday. This has been updated to reflect the changes in rates from the 13.3 to the 12.5, and the sample properties have been updated. And yep, keen if there's any feedback to hear that.
Sorry, Councillor Piddington.
I guess, Jason, I've got one general comment. I guess I was hoping you've corrected the errors and found the mistakes and added the fees on we asked for, but there doesn't appear to be any more general savings. When you went back, there was nothing through the organisation you could find to save the ratepayer?
We've gone through the budgets and assessed that. Look, as I said, assumptions will change, but at the moment, the indices are running very, very high. There were a few misstatements, as you pointed out, that we were able to change in terms of some of the assumptions, but the cost escalations, the depreciation, the escalations are not changing. And so we're unable to change some of the assumptions and drivers around those items. But if they change between draft and final in the next few months, this is an open process that we work through, and that is when we make those changes.
Is there a question?
Sorry,
Yeah, Councillor Scott, thank you.
I've got just a few things, sorry, Jason, here I go again. But one of the things around the council's policy is to fully fund depreciation. Over the last 6 years, have we fully funded depreciation?
I believe we have, yes.
Okay, I couldn't find that, so I just wanted to make sure, because I have this challenge at the moment around depreciation where our neighbours and most of the people around our councils around the country are not funding depreciation.
We have an accounting policy to fund.
No, I know that. I just wanted to know if that is hard and fast line, and over the last 6 years, have we actually fully done that? Okay.
And I just point out that we are actually spending the full depreciation amount as well. So, you know, we really have to fund it.
That's okay. There was a couple of things I recall from our last council meeting on page 80, and I am mindful that Anne has also said do not make too many word changes. It's just around bullet point 1 around inflation, and I think we had a discussion around global events such as the Russia-UK war, lingering impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic and the cost of living crisis. I think just that needs to be changed a little bit, because what we're facing is the cost of living crisis. I think that is the main contributor to our current economic climate, and I'd just like to see that come first, because the Joe Bloggs on the street does not see the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war, and so I don't feel comfortable that that is first. So I'd just like that to be reworded, and hopefully, and that's okay. I just need a clarity. Page 84 is around C Play, and back on the 15th of November, we approved 300,000 for funding, but we have in there 0.8 million, and I cannot find in my brains where that $500,000 is, and it may be before my time. So we approved additional funding of 0.3, but we have 0.8 there. Did we give them more? And I was asleep at the wheel. Just a question, sorry.
There was funding before your time.
Yeah, I'm thinking there must have been, but
Yeah.
I can't find that.
I can't remember the timeline on it. Yeah.
That wouldn't impact on this, because that's government funding.
No, it's not that. What's that? Sorry. Oh, sorry, Gavin, put your mic on.
That was,
there was the original stimulus, which was 80K, and then there was a mil. Yeah, sorry, I'd have to go back into the.
Also, just around, I think what would be really good for the community too is on pages like 85, when we talk about the theatre and heritage projects, I think we need to add in there the actual government funding, like the 11.3 million, because whilst we talk about it, we need to keep repeating that even though the project is 57.1 million, of that 11.3 is from government, and I'd really like to start to see some of that wording coming in. Also, like on page 86, around our new shared cycle walking track, it says that we're partially funded by the government, but let's add it in. What is that? So then, is it? Oh, okay. Yes, but just consistency in our language. Yeah, okay, good. And page 85 again, sorry, jumping around just to keep you all awake. City/town, we've got, I think, 1.3 or something, but isn't that all on hold?
No, the project is still progressing. We're just having a bit of a realignment on what we're doing. We're going to be looking at some quick wins, but no, the project is not on hold, but there will be funding that will be carried forward. Because we had over 3.6 million, I think, in this year's budget. We won't be spending all of that, and that will be come through. So it'll be 1.3 plus whatever we don't spend this year.
That's right. That's my misunderstanding, sorry. And just page 84, I just wanted to, and sorry, just for my mum and dad who read these documents, you know, question 1.8, it says proceed with the proposed increase to rates, and in brackets 12.5% increase in rates overall. Now I reckon that's really confusing because that's factually not true. It is an average, and so we need to either write in there that it's an average, because Timaru residential it is not 12.5. It isn't for Temuka and it isn't for Geraldine. So I think that's quite confusing because I know it is an average, but
And they also sample
it doesn't say it.
properties as well, so there is maybe a bigger font for the explanation. Yeah. Yeah, point your mum and dad to the explanation. No, that's a very good point. And it's interesting, I mean, I've just got glasses, but I need the glasses to read this as well. It is that, yeah, so that's right, this is the challenging version. Fantastic, thank you. Yes, Councillor Pye.
Well, just on that point, on the printed copy you've given us, it still refers to 13.3 on that survey. Oh.
Yeah, and the other one we just wanted to talk to is, sorry, I'm on the back page. Yeah, the back page, as far as question 1, what are the options? Are you comfortable with what's in there? So there's proceed with proposed, increase to rates, which just needs an amendment. Set a lower rates increase and make greater use of debt. I have concerns with that one, but set a higher rates increase and make less use of debt, or reduce council services. So do we want to be careful what we wish for, because a lot of people might say, hey, just reduce council services, but they might not be realistic to what reducing council services means. And so there again, Councillor
Member, and I totally agree. Reduce council services, and we've asked the question to reduce council, to make any significant impact on rates, to reduce council services is huge. So does the public understand what you mean by reduce council services? Because it will be personnel, that's what we're hearing, because it won't be necessarily capital projects. So if we come back with a whole lot of answers of reducing council services, it may be a wasted exercise for those who filled in the paperwork, because the outcome won't be what they expect.
a lot of people think by reducing council services, it's stop the theatre and that will reduce the rates, but that's not the case because it's depreciation, it's escalation in cost that we are putting back into those assets. So for them to understand that, effectively, probably the easiest way to describe it is if you want a lower rate increase, we'll be spending less money on roads and 3 water assets. And that's probably, yes, we will.
No, we won't be, because it's capital program, that won't affect the rates.
No, but that's not a capital program funded by debt. So there's, if you, probably the way to look at it is vertical generally is debt funded, horizontal is funded through rates. That's probably the best way to look at it.
Andrew?
Yeah, basically, well, we could reduce renewals, but that is funded from depreciation. So if you have a policy of fully funding depreciation, then you're still having to fund that. Some of the depreciation, I understand, is funded by loan as well. So again, it's not going to have much of an impact, no.
This actually runs into the problem that we have around 3 waters if we don't have control over it. So the conversation is, so you're moving those rates to an entity, you're still paying a water rate, but you can't guarantee that renewal of asset is happening in the area, whereas at least under our guidance regime, if you like, you're going to renew the asset in the area, and that is around that level of service. And so it's the small main renewals, it's all those things up your, mum, dad's street and what have you. So yeah, that's changed. So
And to your point, Councillor Parker, it would be less maintenance on roads. So, Andrew, we might go and do rural roads every 3 months or something like that. It would, that in order to make a site, you're quite correct, to make a significant difference, you would have to look at something like roading in order to get the, and or water, and how much we fund depreciation, and as the point's made, we spend that. So we would be borrowing more or just doing less, and you just have more leaks and non-performance in your water network, and your roads would have more potholes. I mean, your point is correct. If you make significant changes there, the service level will drop.
Yeah. Again, it will be in the maintenance area. That's where the operating costs are. So, you could put permanent boil water notices on certain water schemes, save on chemical costs, things like that. But yeah, you can close swimming pools for a longer period. You can close libraries at weekends. That's the sort of thing you have to do to make a difference.
So do you think that the public understands that by putting reduced council services just as it is? Is there an explanation through this document that says if you don't choose to accept this rate rise, this is what you're going to miss out on?
Oh, I think, Councillor Parker, I don't think, my view would be they'd struggle with that, and it's actually a conversation into the long-term plan about what levels of service you do want, and I think that's the place where you want to have, where you want to have, what will happen is is a long-term plan discussion about what levels of service you really want, and then you can have the discussion about what that means in practice for people in the community. So I think officers, look at that and say there's considerable risk leaving it in, because you might get answers that are probably not, people aren't really going to know exactly the financial effect because we haven't modelled that, and that would be unfair on them, would be my view.
Does anyone have a view on some of those things? And I think the longer term thinking around review of all, costs, contractors, etc., would bode well for timing for the long-term plan again. So although it's a hard decision for the 1 year, that's what's in front of us. But I don't want to put the wrong thing in this consultation document, because most I've had 5 emails, mainly probably all of from senior cits that would be on fixed income, and all of them mention a theatre and landfill, which are debt funding versus, and just say, quit that and we'll have a lower rate, thank you very much. But that's not the case. So we don't want to put anything that people aren't going to be able to understand.
I've just got a quick question for Andrew.
Yeah, Councillor Oliver.
Just a quick question for Andrew. 4.9 million Talbot Street during sewer siphon upgrade, that's quite a big escalation on the original cost. Is that right?
So which one is that?
Back page here, you got 4.9 million Talbot Street during sewer siphon upgrade completion. 4.9 million? Is that right? I thought it was more around a $1 million.
Sorry,
Is that escalated quite a bit?
Page you on, Councillor Oliver?
Oh, just the back page?
Oh, the numbers, the summary?
Sorry,
No.
I believe that is the latest estimate that we have
That is the
for
latest
that
estimate.
project, yeah, which is critical to Geraldine, to be honest, yeah, so.
Yeah, I realise that.
Yeah.
This might stop my phone ringing. But yeah, I can remember that being in the long-term plan for $1 million at one stage. So,
I think that the scope of the project has changed a bit, and we realise that we're having to upsize the pipe as well as renew it. So yeah, there is an extra cost in that, and of course, yeah, through the consenting side of things, it is a difficult one to do, drilling under the river.
Already, so any other changes, councillors, in regard to, and I assume you've sort of picked up most of that. Sorry, where am I looking? Oh, sorry. Oh, thank you. Councillor Jackson, apologies.
Oh, no, I wasn't actually going to say anything.
Oh.
It was just an observation.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned me. Question 2, I wonder how many people are going to tick increased rates or fees and charges so they don't need to borrow so much.
Yeah, look, it's a balance, and you would be surprised what people are comfortable with paying, as long as they're seeing some value for money. Yeah. Yeah, Councillor Parker.
The 1.3 million for fluoridation, so we are front footing that, it can be delayed. Will that 1.3 be spent this financial coming year, are we certain?
We are planning to spend that money to put fluoridation in, but you're quite correct, councillor, that it can be deferred. The advice we've received from Ministry of Health was that they will not be looking at for it to be in place until the 2024-25 year, so it could be deferred a year. But yeah, we are talking about community health here, and I guess, yeah, that is a council decision.
I'm just planting the seed.
But loan funded also, capital, yeah. So, yeah, might be more around the work program as opposed to ahead of the team and the capability to deliver. Did you want to take that conversation any further, Councillor Parker? No. Yeah, no worries.
Just looking to see how we can reduce the costs.
Oh, no,
If
totally.
there's any way, there is a cost crisis at the moment, and it is affecting everyone.
Oh, no,
From
yeah.
the super and to the families with mortgages.
Yep.
As I was saying to Andrew earlier, my mortgage is increasing by $260 a fortnight come June with the interest rates. Imagine if I was a family of 3 kids that I was supporting, losing an extra $260 a fortnight is significant. So I think we really need to get back to the grassroots and see where we can trim down when we can. This is hard times for everyone, for super and for income.
Yeah, and I think the opportunity is, although, as to Jason's point, 22, I think, is the 3-month period that we've got in front of us to find other costs, and take your point around escalating costs for everyone. I think the benefits have all just increased, which is helpful. I think they've gone up by 7%, haven't they? But, ultimately it comes down to, well, the issue actually will come down to next year. If we don't fund some of the stuff this year, then we're on catch up. So, we think it's hard this year, it might be harder next year. So we can compare ourselves to other councils that have decided to take different pathways, but they are moving or kicking the can down the road. They're putting it back. I talked to an ECAN councillor who was discussing Christchurch City, and I don't know the facts on this, but effectively, you know, they've pushed an issue down to year 5 where the rate increase is 19.2% or something. So that might be great for today, but actually some of these, you know, financial decisions, that's what we're here for. I know they're hard, but you know, this isn't done and dusted until June, and I'm comfortable that we, you know, still need to go out with something pretty honest to the community and ask them what they think. Yes.
I just add, we have started going back and really, with Jason, really trying to examine every line, and we're trying really hard to actually come back with some genuine savings, not just sort of reallocation savings, if I use that term too, Laura, and we are looking at that. And it's in areas, because what happens is we estimate, if I take areas like insurance and areas like energy, we tend to be a price taker. So the question is, what can we do that might reduce some of our costs there in those areas and look after the pennies and the pounds will take care of themselves, kind of an approach. So we are looking at that, which to Jason's point, and we do have better systems now to go and interrogate and look at it. To Jason's point, we are going to be looking at these numbers quite thoroughly to see what we can do to bring back some savings, because we see what the numbers are. They're big, we get that.
And it also speaks in topical, because this is election year, and I want to put this out to all those parties out there, that policies that direct fund to local government need to be considered, because we're not a budget line outside of Waka Kotahi as far as central government goes, and we need direct investment because the model can't continue on. I was looking at Te Apo rates. I think they were around 5,000, where we average 3,000. You know, our provincial rates are still probably at about a medium, you know, level compared to other areas, and so they're facing similar rate increases whereby they'll be $500, you know, or something along those lines. Don't quote me on the exact numbers. So you know, the model doesn't work, and I guess they won't have the theatres and the stadiums perhaps, but they'll have a massive roading network that they have to deal with. So you know, different communities have different problems. They're not all the same, and they're quite bespoke, but we need government policy that is going to see some of the tax take delivered back to where it's generated. And I always go to the fact that we've got a real rock star economy here, but we get so affected by all reform, Three Waters, with its health reform. We know there's some challenges in that space, Polytech reform, and actually this is the opportunity for central government to recognise where some of the money's generated and give back to our communities. So that's my rant. Slightly off topic, but you know, as far as a funding line, you know, to have some GST back on housing or on commercial would be great to see it, you know, into our, you know, being tagged to infrastructure. So, yeah. Righty, let's sign this off. Yeah. So as far as, reduced council services, are you comfortable to take that out? Is there further comment on that? Sorry, Councillor Pennington.
Look, I think we should leave it in. I mean, we've got to treat our ratepayers with some intelligence. 1,000 people aren't going to tick that box, but we've got to give them the options. If we give them the other options that are unpalatable as well, we can't just pick and choose which one we like the least and take it out, I don't think. That's just my thought. I'd rather see it.
Any other comments on that? If it's to stay in, I think it just somehow needs really good explanation. I'm not sure how you're going to work that. I know you've got a deadline to work to, and sorry, I'm looking through the glass. I can't see the Councillor Burke.
No, I understand exactly what you're saying, Councillor Piddington, but it's just too raw. I know we have to treat our public with some semblance of the fact that they understand potentially what goes on here, but just by saying reduce current services, if we do get a significant amount of people seeing that as a very easy option and ticks it, what does that mean? What do we do then as a council to say what services and how? And when we don't reduce it in the areas that we can, because they're already underway and they are significant things, people will come back and hunt us on it. I think either we need a decent explanation or we take it out for now.
Thoughts? Councillor Pye.
Can we just add e.g. roads, water supply, sewerage after it? That's really the bulk of the money, isn't it? And, that's, well, that is one of the options. If people don't want to pay more rates, that's the alternative, is we spend less on roading, water and sewerage.
Your Worship, you see that we've got a number of mandatory KPIs in the water and space, the three waters that we have to meet. So that would be challenging, I think, Andrew, for us to then meet those mandatory KPIs if we were to significantly reduce our levels of service there. I mean, I suppose as we do spend the depreciation, which is kind of covered in either making a lower rates increase and making greater use of debt, or just replacing less, but eventually it catches up with us. But that's the problem, because it is in water and roading, so we could do less in the roading space around maintenance, but the problem in the water space is our requirement to meet mandatory KPIs and so on, and would probably end up with quite a lot more boil water notices and so on, would we?
Yes, and I think we'd probably be legally non-compliant as well, because, where water is covered by Tomato ROI now, we have legal obligations to maintain good water supplies. Likewise with sewage, we have consents. Could be in a difficult situation.
I mean, technically you could pull back on roading. We spend a couple of mil over and above the subsidised. So, that you could put that there, but it's just going to add to the deterioration over time, isn't it? And just the reality of it is that the country councils will wear the brunt of some of that feedback. Yeah. But I mean, take the point around statutory, but you could include roading, which would be quite real. Where do you want to, let's tidy this up. In or out, and if it's in with an example of, Councillor Pye.
Well, I'm kind of getting the impression reducing services is not an option, so take it out. That's what I'm hearing here.
Can we just have some, so we nods around the table? If there's enough. Councillor Parker. Yeah. Thanks, OJ.
And then you've got that narrative under there to tell us more about your choice below. If you think council should reduce services, tell us what you think they should reduce. I suppose we'd like to remove that or change it.
Why can't we just leave it the way it is? It seems to read pretty fine to me. I mean, are we worried about the sort of feedback we're going to get? We do with it what we want to do. I mean, just leave it in there and let people make their own choices around it.
I mean, you might pick up in the explanation. It's all right. Councillors, do you want to add?
I agree with OJ.
Put your microphone on, Councillor.
Sorry, haven't you got an explanation box? It says there, tell us more about your choices if you choose council to reduce services. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, it is, but it might not be realistic as to that's the problem. People will think,
I think if you put sewer on that there, if people think it should be the theatre, they'll just write theatre in that box anyway.
Yeah, I know, but then if we make a decision the other way, they'll be thinking, well, I told you to reduce the service, but you haven't.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I guess
and
you take it out then.
and it was never realistic, so that's the issue.
I guess you take it out then.
What's that? Yeah, we can too. Look, I think we've. So, do you want to just give me a? Sorry, did you want? Oh, sorry, Councillor Pittington. Sorry.
I guess people don't always just look inwardly. They look out and see that Christchurch don't fund depreciation. So I'm getting, why are we doing it? Because there's others that don't. And Jason's point, we were doing 100%, but we've decided tactically not 100%. What number did you come up with, Jason?
We're still funding 100%. We're funding the balance through debt.
Okay. But I mean, we're playing with it, and people don't understand why some councils don't have to, and therefore their rates don't go up. So I need some clear explanations around that.
I think there's a sort of an issue here around language. So they say, well, we're not funding depreciation, but they are funding renewals and asset replacement and so on. So it depends on the language you use. In some shape or form, you have to provide money to replace and upgrade your assets. And so some of it is in the language, and depreciation is a charge against the loss of the diminishing value of the asset, and so we just talk about it. But I think some councils, what is it they say, that they don't fund depreciation, but they do fund renewal and asset replacement?
Yeah, I think a classic example is Christchurch is a good example of the fact that most of their assets are new, so that they don't have a lot of renewal expenditure that they actually need to fund. So they can choose to defer, I guess, the depreciation and catch it up later on because their assets are all new. Likewise, Selwyn is exactly the same. Because of the huge development, the average age of their assets is about 25 years, with a useful life of 100. So hence, you know, that they have that luxury, whereas we're not in that situation. Our assets are getting towards the end of their useful life, and we must keep up with them. Otherwise, we're going to get increased maintenance, which is a direct cost on the rates.
In the last report, it actually did say that the 13.3% did not fully fund depreciation. The rate increase, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Stu's saying.
Yeah.
It is a disadvantage.
Councillor Shannon.
The only thing really that isn't in here, if I could say, which doesn't, I suppose, help our ratepayers understand what's going on here, is perhaps a paragraph, another little box if you like, explain what the difference is between general inflation and what we're talking about here. Consistently, the feedback I get from the public is, but inflation is 7%. And, you know, we're not comparing apples with apples here. So it could be as simple as a box there that just says the inflation that you see in the media or whatever is made up of this. This is how this figure comes to. These are the things that we're looking at that actually do affect community services and why that is markedly different. And I think if people could clearly understand the difference between what they hear on the news and what we're doing here, it may be an easier pill to swallow.
Good question, Councillor Shannon. So we have one of the bubbles on our 23-24 annual plan page does talk to inflation, so we can reword that slightly to ensure that we capture some of the stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a hard one. You've got a great point. That CPI, consumer basket of goods versus pipes and roads, it is a hard one to explain. And when you're not going to 100% explain that unless you're having one-on-one conversations, unfortunately, it's a real hard one. Cool. Anything further? So where did we get to with question one? It's always the wee things that take some time. Councillor Pye.
I'm still with removing it, and there is any other feedback section there where our ratepayers can provide any other feedback that they may choose to, because I just don't think it is a option for us, and therefore we shouldn't be asking for feedback on it.
Yeah, I'm personally comfortable with that. Is that generally comfortable? Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you. I think we can move on. So let's go back to resolutions. Is there anything else that we need to cover? No.
Yeah, it just might be useful for you and I to have the ability for the mayor and CE to make minor amendments to the document.
Yes. So as far as resolutions, we'll just add delegation again for CE, the mayor to make minor editorial amendments if so wish, to sign those off. And otherwise, let's just work through. I'm happy to just put that through as a block. Is everyone comfortable with that? Yeah, so can I have a mover for recommendations 1, 2 and 3, and 4 will be the additional delegation. Thank you, Councillor Burt. Can I have a seconder for that?
Just one question, sorry.
No, yeah, all right, Councillor Pennington.
So you're taking out reduced council services out of question 2 as well, are you? You're deleting them from both?
It would have to, where are we? Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. I think the intention of question 2 was the future, so to look at the long-term plan. They may have suggestions that when we come to do the long-term plan, that potentially we could factor those in. Yeah.
Yeah, so in that case, it can probably be a consideration, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll just keep it in. Yeah. Cool, thank you. So Councillor Burt had moved it. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Shannon. Any further discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you everyone for your time and really appreciate that. And so just probably quite importantly, we've got the dates set out for consultation, so that'll be out. And did you want to jump up for just a wee sec? Grab a seat next to Andrew. Thanks. So just the normal channels as far as getting this out there.
Yes, that's right. Heavily, big emphasis on the website, but we are still sending this out with the Courier newspaper because it goes to every household in the district. And also we'll be getting Stephen and his team to do some promotion through the Little Council notice board and Facebook and things like that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Any questions on that? It's just important that we do get out to as many people as possible and encourage feedback.
Yeah, just one question, if it's okay.
Yeah.
You say that a courier goes to every single household. No, it does not. As a former courier delivery boy, putting out my kids, okay? But it does not go to every single household. In fact, quite a few people do not get the courier. I don't know what the number is, but there's lots that don't.
Does anyone have any suggestions about another printed media?
No, look, I just think we talk about this each time with consultation, but I just think we should probably still have a decent advert in the Herald pointing at least to the website, etc., just that we cover all bases.
A good bit of radio would be quite good too, I think.
Shall we? Yeah, we'll go back to agenda item, where were we? Number 6, conflicts of interest. Moving forward, thank you. I think that's it. So I really appreciate everyone's time for that. And councillors, you've got a workshop. Thanks for all your work, team.